Hey everyone, welcome to the Snooze Strategist. This is the show where we discuss the science of sleep so you can manage your night to master your day. I'm Alex Young. We've got Ashen Bithana with us today, and we've got a special guest. So we've got OG here from the Brains Matter podcast. OG here is, let me share a little bit about the podcast. Launched in 2006. As a podcast, and just more recently he's shifted onto YouTube. He's had 203 podcast recordings with a real focus around science. So this is going to be an interesting discussion because Brains Matter podcast is really focused on talking to scientists and researchers and those that we can learn more from. And he's got a real focus around simplifying science so a broader audience can better appreciate. OG, welcome to the show. And this is the first time we've actually had a guest on board, so that's going to be very exciting for us. Maybe you can give us a real quick rundown, a little bit more about the Brains Matter podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex and Ashen. I feel privileged to be your first guest, so that's a big set of shoes to fill, I think, for for the show. So a little bit about the podcast. So I started it back in 2006. When I was growing up, there was a whole host of shows and science on television that you could watch. They had the Curiosity Show and lots of things that you could watch after school. And then as I got into my teens and early 20s, I found there was a lack of it. You had to actually go out and seek science, and science had the reputation of being somewhat nerdy and uncool. Thankfully, that's changed recently. But around my mid to late 20s, I thought, there's got to be more focus on science. There were people making decisions in Parliament without any understanding of science. So, let's just talk about climate change, for example. Very basic science, backgrounds would have helped with some of those decisions. So environment, climate change, energy, all those sorts of things. If you look at politics, the majority of people have a law background with very little understanding of what's going on in medicine, in health, in engineering, all sorts of things. So I thought if I could do my little bit, I can't take credit for that. My now wife said at the time, if you think you can do better, why don't you? So I thought, well, I've got a laptop, I've got a microphone, I'll put up 3 episodes, and if I get 50 people listening by the 3rd episode, I'll keep going. And so I put the first episode up. It was all just audio back at the time, put it up on iTunes, and I had about 12 listeners with no advertising, no social media, nothing like that. And the second one, I ended up getting about 70 listeners. And I thought, okay, I've hit my target. I'll just keep going. So I did that for a little bit of time. And I thought, you know what? It's not actually that exciting listening to myself talk about different topics. I'd have to go out and, write a little summary of the topics I was talking about and come up with a bit of a script. And I refused to listen to my early episodes because it just sounds like me reading. And I thought it'd be far more interesting talking to guests and talking to them about what they're passionate about, what they're doing research on, what excites them. And so I started doing that. So the first person I had on, he was doing his PhD in, it's a long time ago now. I forgot, but he was a really, I forgot what the topic was, but he was a really good storyteller. And then the second person I had was a bit of a catalyst because there are a lot of Star Trek fans around the world and Star Wars fans. And the person I interviewed was doing her PhD on the commonality between ancient Greek and Roman mythology and science fiction, including Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. And so that just got me a whole bunch of listeners. And then I started interviewing other people doing, hardcore science, astronomy, physics, and things like that. And if you listen to, you probably know, we'll probably need to edit this bit out. I forgot the name of the guy.
That's all right.
So let me start again. So you've probably heard of Michael Parkinson, the really famous English interviewer. He ran a show on, I think it was BBC TV for many, many years, and interviewed many, many famous people. He was recorded to. He said at one point that he struggled to get guests onto a show when he first started, but then he interviewed one of the most famous movie stars at the time, and that was Laurence Olivier.
Oh wow!
And we know Laurence Olivier from many classic 1960s movies. And once Laurence Olivier was interviewed, and that interview ran really well, they were getting knocks on their door to say, "Can you interview me, or can you interview the person that I'm managing?" And I interviewed someone from the International Astronomical Union. This is the mob that voted back in 2006 or 2008 about the demotion of Pluto from being a planet to a minor planet. And he was very, very well connected, and he was an absolutely fabulous storyteller. He talked about the reasons why, the science behind it, the rationale is not just an emotional thing about Pluto being a famous small planet in the sky kind of thing. And he was a really, really good storyteller. And after that, I had exactly the same thing happen. I started getting other astronomers saying, "Can I be on your show?" Or "I know someone who should be on your show." And it got to the point where in 2013, I think it was, I was the official media person for the Australian Astronomical Society's annual conference in 2013. And I was wandering around interviewing astronomers saying, "Look, here's who I am." And they go, "I know who you are." And it was a bit scary thinking they've recognized my voice. So that's kind of the quick summary. So as you mentioned, I've done 203 episodes. Most of them were done on audio. I've recently started putting them on YouTube because that's just another channel, another avenue. So feel free to share and like and subscribe if you want to get onto that for those people listening. My cadence hasn't been quite as frequent recently as it has been in the past. I used to do it every couple of weeks. Now it's a few times a year, depending on workload. But the topic of workload is probably going to coincide with some of the questions you're going to ask very soon.
Okay, very good. That's fascinating. I think that it's reflecting upon the role that your podcast has played and that you've played. I see it as being a mouthpiece for these individuals and a way to amplify their voices and the knowledge that they've got, because as we know now, unfortunately, in this day and age, social media does a terrible job of amplifying the wrong things. And unfortunately, you don't have the same balance when it comes to great scientists and really simplifying it for the general populace. So I think it's a really important role that you play there in ensuring that a broader audience can find these individuals that you've come across.
Yeah, that's right. And as you said, the way that people consume media these days is very different. They will go and seek what aligns with their personal beliefs as opposed to the real figures. If you've watched an American show with an English host called John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, there was an example in there where he showed, people, a lot of modern media say we want to take both sides of the story, but the reality is, and he used climate change as an example, if you want to make a real even or real balanced argument, and he brought in 97 climate scientists and three deniers, and he said, "This is what it actually looks like." And that is the reality of it, as opposed to one person saying this and the other person saying that.
Yeah.
And I feel like technology probably has played the role there, right? Like with the algorithms now controlling whatever you see. So your personal beliefs will either intentionally or unintentionally control what you see.
That's right. Yeah. So, YouTube does it, Twitter does it, Facebook does it. It doesn't give you a sequence or things based on a particular topic necessarily. It curates it to say, here's what you're more likely to consume, because it's all about the clicks. It's all about the advertising. What is the person who's reading it more likely to click on, as opposed to what is it that they really should know and understand?
Yeah, that's true. I find my approach to wrangling my social media feeds, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, I periodically audit what I'm following or who I'm following and remove what I feel like is not as positive and conducive to my inputs, and try and get, here's the flavor of what I want to learn from. Of course, you keep getting the ads popping up, and sort of it's like remove as much as you can. But yeah, you almost have to be quite clear about and intentional and curate what you want to hear and listen. If you don't, then you'll just get whatever the algorithm feeds you, isn't it?
That's right.
Cool. It's fascinating, the amount of effort and the duration that you've been running this podcast for. I think we've got a lot to learn from you. So thanks for sharing that. I think, as you know, you've seen our show before. I'm sure you're a regular watcher of Snooze Strategists. One thing that we were talking about the other day, together with you, was around, and this is quite common, the questions that we get around not only sleep, but stress. So many of us may work in corporate, or whether it's startups, and for various reasons, stress pops up in our day-to-day, and it manifests in different ways in terms of how it impacts our health. You come from a tech background, you're a techie, so to speak, similar to me, computer science originally, right?
That's right.
Now, being someone that's worked in the corporate world from a technology and IT sort of function perspective, just curious to learn, have you had any experiences yourself when it comes to, has workplace stress been a thing? And if so, has it impacted sleep? And is there a correlation that you've seen?
Absolutely. So I think pretty much everybody who's worked in a corporate at some point has had this experience, and I won't name the organisation, but it's a very large, well-known organisation in the Australia and Asia Pac kind of region. And the culture was very much that of, it's what you appear to do, not what you actually do. And so if you were there 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, doing your job, doing a really good job, you would be overlooked for someone who wasn't as productive, who showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning and waited till the boss went home and finished at 6 or 7 or things like that. And they would be the ones getting promoted because it was all about the appearance of what you did. This particular organization, I ended up doing about 80 hours a week when my kids were quite young, unnecessarily, because that was just the culture of the organization. And it wasn't something I enjoyed. There were stresses and pressures put on you unnecessarily. And I think it's unnecessary. I say unnecessarily because it wasn't a health organization where people's lives were on the line. It was just all in the name of increasing share price. And, that was their driver, as it is with many organizations. Some do it better than others. And it ultimately comes down to the culture of how the organization runs itself. And this organization ran really poorly. And from what I'm hearing lately, it still does. And I just got to the point where, as I said, I was doing 80 hours a week. I'd get home at night. I wouldn't be able to read stories to my kids when they were, quite young, very, very early, toddlers and, wanting to hear stories before they go to bed. Wasn't able to do that. And you continually think about things that are happening at work or how you're interacting with people. And you think about that as you're trying to go to sleep. And if you're thinking about things as you're trying to go to sleep, it takes you a lot longer to go to sleep. And then the second thing that happens is you wake up in the middle of the night, still thinking about it, going, maybe I should do this tomorrow morning. And you think about it for half an hour and you end up with such a broken sleep pattern. You maybe wake up 2 or 3 times in the night. You wake up in the morning, you felt like you haven't slept at all. And then to make it worse, you've forgotten what you decided in the middle of the night that you were going to do the following morning.
Wow.
And I had that for probably about 6 months in this particular organization. I thought, wow, this has got to stop. This is unsustainable because A, you're unhappy,
Yeah.
B, your health is suffering. So stress leads on to many other things. You start getting colds and respiratory issues, as well as having the sleep patterns. And you need your sleep. And Ashen is the expert on this, not me. But you need your sleep to help your body recover. That's when it sort of goes into a bit of recovery mode and repair mode and things like that. So if that's not happening, then it just gets worse and worse, and you're more susceptible to things later on. And I thought, this is just going to stop.
But was there a point of something occurring that was the wake up call? That's like, this is unsustainable.
Yeah, for sure. So I got home from work one day. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and my laptop under my arm. Opened the front door, and my son, who was probably about 5 or 6 years old, was standing at the front door. And I said, "What are you doing awake?" And he said, "You don't read stories to me anymore."
Oh.
And I thought, there's no amount of money that's worth this. This particular organisation paid a lot of money. And I think that's why a lot of people work for them, because they do pay a lot of money. But if you actually work out your hourly rate, it's actually not worth it. And and I thought, well, if your kids are noticing this, then that's the wake up call. And so I went back the next day, and I quit.
Wow. Yeah.
And my boss's response to me was, "No, you don't. You get paid too much to quit."
Wow.
And I said, "No, I'm serious. I quit." And it was the only time I've quit without having another job to go to, and it was the best thing I could have done. So I went back to university and started not to study, but I did some guest lecturing at Melbourne Uni prior to that. So I contacted them again. They said, yeah, we'd love to have you. And I was doing 2 nights a week lecturing at Melbourne Uni for 6 months, and that just gave me the real reset that I needed. And so for 6 months, it was the best thing I could have done. I was still doing things that kept my mind ticking, something useful, felt like I was giving back. And it's almost like doing the podcast where you're imparting information to other people, and at the same time recovering from all that stress that had built up.
It's really powerful, and so it's such an incredible thing to have your children notice these things. They're at an age when your presence is really felt, or whether you're there or not, that they know that you're not there. So it's you're talking about the balance, that the work-life balance, family balance as well. And then when you shifted to Melbourne Uni, did you notice a big change in your own health as part of, now you didn't have not only the stress, but I'm assuming time to sleep?
That's right. So I felt a lot better in every sense. And as I said, it was the best thing I could have done. And I think sometimes even though we realize we're in a situation which we don't enjoy and shouldn't be in for a long time, some people put up with it. And look, everybody's situation is different. Some people say, look, I really need the money and I can't afford to do something until I find another job. Or people are in very specific industries where it's very difficult to find another job. But sometimes you need to think about what are your alternatives. Is there something else you can do in the meantime? And even though you do realize that, sometimes it takes someone else, whether it's a family member or a friend or a parent, to say, look, just stop. This isn't good for you.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like coming from a healthcare background, I always talk about quality of life. Don't think about anything else. Like every action you take, make sure that it impacts your quality of life positively. But it is in a state now, work plays a fairly critical role in our lives, and almost like controlling, like how you described, we pay too much money, you're not going to quit, because it's basically like you're become like a puppet in there. And we have talked multiple times in the podcast how everyone basically organize their life around work, not around themselves. And the impact it has on yourself, like in your case, I guess your family, the kids, it's incredible. You can't put a dollar value on it. I think
this is right. There's the old analogy of juggling the balls in life. You've got health, which is a glass ball. You've got family and important people, which is a glass ball, work, which is a rubber ball, and other things which are rubber balls, and you keep juggling those. You can drop one of the rubber balls and that's fine. But if you drop one of the glass balls, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And the other, famous quote, which I don't recall who said it, is nobody ever goes to their grave saying, gee, I wish I spent more time at work.
Yeah.
That's right. Very good.
Absolutely.
Do you think that now post-COVID, you've seen the changes in the workplace and, remote working and all this and that, does your attitude to work or the workplace, has it changed at all in terms of the opportunities and in terms of balance?
I think what remote work and COVID has really shown us is that you don't have to be in the office to be productive. And in fact, some people are more productive at home, especially the introverts, those who are naturally introverted and who work well alone without being disturbed. I found that, when I went to the office, that, there's pros and cons to both, right? You get to talk to people. There's the, hallway or lift conversations that you have, which aren't readily available when you're working from home. But at the same time, when you knuckle down and get to it, you can really get a lot more done working remotely. So I think there's that fine balance. Some of this and some of that is probably ideal. Where I don't think, and we've seen the Musks of the world and so on say, no, you have to be back in the office, 5 days a week. Otherwise, I don't think you're working. And I think that's the absolutely wrong attitude. It shows two things, and I'm sort of diverging a little bit here, but it's more about workplace culture. It's about showing trust in the people. So this same organisation that I spoke about earlier, which was very much about the appearance, they would clock watch, what time you came in, what time you left, and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to what did you actually produce of value to the organisation. So if someone produced something of value in 35 hours, and you were doing something innovative for the next 5 hours, and that's your 40 hours, and that is more useful to an organisation than doing 60 hours of something that barely gets the job done without doing any innovation. So I would say the first person is far more valuable to the organisation, worth more money than the second person. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that also shows, in the way people operate, they can go drop their kids off at school. They can go to a doctor's appointment, or quickly go out and do an errand or something, and they will happily work around it and do that valuable, productive work for you, because you show that trust in them. If you show trust in someone, they will pay that back to you. If you don't show trust in someone, people look for another job, and especially with the current generation, millennials and Gen Z, they're not going to work for an organisation that doesn't have the flexibility. It is a must-have these days, and if you feel more flexible, more relaxed, feel like you're being trusted, that's probably going to lend yourself to better sleep patterns as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was almost like it started giving me a bit of chills when you talk about the time you went through that stressful period where you couldn't even sleep, and it kind of brought me back some memories I had. It's incredible, like the impact it has on you. You can't focus because you have poor sleep, and there's this anxiety creeping up. The long-term health impact on your quality and the kind of your well-being, it's too important not to care about. So I think I'm so glad that you mentioned that you made the move and you made a decision to take care of yourself and put yourself first. I think that's what we want to start a movement around in workplaces now, to take care of yourself, put yourself in first. Maybe start with something like sleep, which everyone does, and see whether that helps you out. Yeah.
I'm curious if now that you've had that contrast between the fairly poor sleep induced thanks to workplace stress through to a healthier situation, was there anything conscious that you put in place that you changed consciously when it came to, all right, this is my new clean slate lifestyle? Was there anything you put in place to help support your sleep needs?
I actually consciously made an effort to try and sleep a little bit earlier as well. And it sounds very simple and almost childish in a sense, but I think it helps a lot, because even post that job I talked about, there are moments where you are under a little bit of stress at times during the year where certain outcomes need to be completed, or sometimes you might put yourself under stress for other reasons. So there might be things that you need to get done for your family, or personal projects that you've done and you're pushing yourself to do, or other things that might happen in your life, like health of a loved one, or a parent, or things like that, and that puts you under a different kind of stress. But what I try to ensure is that I've tried to make sure I've got a certain time where I go, no, this is the time to go to bed, and it's something that we used to do as kids. I grew up in Perth, where at 7:30, one of the TV stations, or all the TV stations actually, would have a children's character come on saying, it's time for bed, boys and girls, and they'd have the good night music and all that sort of stuff. And that was going a long time ago now. They don't do that anymore. But it's almost a little bit like that. You hit a certain time and go, okay, unless I've got something really urgent that I can't put off until tomorrow, I'm going to go to sleep. And in most cases, the thing that you think is important, you can put off until tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can just wake up a little bit earlier and go, my mind's fresh, I'm actually going to work better in the morning.
Yeah. So what is your cutoff time now?
10.
And previously, when you used to sleep, well, previously in the first organization you mentioned, what time were you typically sleeping at?
Earliest would have been 12. It's probably around 1, because you'd get home and continue to work, or not be able to sleep because of things that you're thinking about and so on. And I say 10, but that's usually the latest now.
Oh, okay, that's good. And the only mechanism is your own self-control and knowing in your head that you've made a commitment to yourself that 10's the latest, and you'll watch the time, and you're just aware of the time and what your own needs are.
I cheat a little bit, to be honest. I've got a little reminder on my watch.
Okay. Apple Watch, is it? Are you using Apple Watch or something?
No, I've got a Garmin.
Oh, okay.
So you can actually put in there what your sleep time is, and it will automatically remind you. You don't have to set a reminder. It's got a function to say, what time are you aiming to get to bed?
That's brilliant. I think that's a tool maybe we should actually promote other people to use as well.
Yeah, it's got a little app, as most things do these days, and you can set it in the app to say, what's your sleep time? And you can set up a few other things to measure your health in there as well.
Okay. I guess it takes some self-discipline to go, it's gone off, and not snooze your own watch.
Yeah. But most of the time I'm sort of, I've beaten it to the punch anyway.
Oh, very, very good. So what happens if you go to bed at 9:30 and then you get woken up at 10 o'clock saying it's time to sleep now?
You can switch it off. Or sometimes I forget and I go, oh no, forgot about it, and then just switch it off and go back.
Okay. No, that's a really good tip. That's really helpful. And then what time do you wake up? Do you aim for a time, or do you just, your body will just naturally wake up now?
I've got a natural alarm clock, which is in the form of 2 dogs who tell us when they're ready to eat in the morning.
Yeah. And what time's that?
They usually wake up at about 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
But any time between 6 and 7, really.
Yeah, I've got a puppy at the moment who wakes us up at about 6:30 to 7, door scratching, and it's like, so for anything that we want to do, need to plan it as I was talking about earlier, the 5 a.m. club, it's okay to do it anything before, but if you want to sleep in, there's no chance.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So, yeah, just curious about, is there any, I think I was mentioning to you earlier, is sleep something that you consciously prepare for, or as part of your, a lot of people put a lot of time and effort towards their gym regime and the nutrition and all these other aspects of health, which are important. I'm curious about whether or not other people put much thought or consideration into planning their sleep as well.
I think for me, it's mostly around trying to get the amount and the quality. So I don't know how accurate the devices that we use, like the Apple Watches and the Garmins and so on, are, but they tend to say, here's how long you were in deep sleep, here's how long you were in REM sleep, and then it can give you a quality measure. So I actually check my watch in the morning to see how long I've slept and what the quality of it was like, and it'll give you a rating of, good, fair, poor, depending on the number of times you've woken up, or it measures your stress levels as well and all these sorts of things. So, as a bit of a nerd that we alluded to earlier, it's fascinating seeing all these different figures and going, well, the stress levels were up here yesterday and my sleep is here. So is there a correlation? Or I didn't wake up any times where I had a lot more deep sleep and it says my rating was good. This night the rating was fair or poor. What was the amount of deep sleep or REM sleep I had at this time? And you can sort of draw your own conclusions from all of that, and then link it back to the stress that you had in the previous day or week, and go, okay, yeah, it's not just something that people talk about plucking out of thin air. There's actually some genuine reality to this.
That's good. So you agree that there's a correlation, or you trust that there's a correlation?
I do, and look, people can argue about the accuracy of these devices, but I don't think it's the accuracy of the devices themselves that matter, because they give you a pattern. So whether the number is 12 or the number is 14, if that is your normal, and suddenly you're getting an 18 or a 6, then you go, oh, hold on, something's different here.
Yeah.
And so it's that discrepancy that you're looking for.
Cool. Ashen, do you have any further questions for OG?
Have you noticed? So it was amazing to hear that you actually try to actively have regular time to go to bed. Have you noticed that change if you don't get your? It sounds like you probably get about 8.5 hours, and if you don't get that, have you noticed any changes within you? Is that the reason you actually push to stick to that pattern?
I did notice that I was feeling quite tired and lethargic, so it was a conscious effort on my part to try and get put myself in the best situation where I could feel energized and be able to do the things that I need to do for the following day.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think I almost see.
And look,
sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and I know that from your health background and expertise, you're going to say there's a lot of variables that go into that, like your nutrition and exercise and so on. But you need to try and tackle, all of them. But I think the thing that a lot of us can really work on is the sleep, because, with COVID working from home, it made the amount of walking and exercise we're doing more difficult. But the sleep is something that we could all work on, no matter what the situation was.
I was going to say, I can almost see that entrepreneurial thinking there. Like initially, you mentioned you saw a need for a podcast because the science wasn't publicly available or easily available for people. So you fixed it, and it's almost like you realized not enough sleep will make you tired and lethargic in the morning. So you actually acted on it, which is, I think, the problem we as a society have right now. Rather than address a core problem, you caffeine to cocaine, I guess, try to stay up, right? Having the stimulants to address the symptoms of the problem rather than addressing the core problem. But I guess I think it's probably the problem the corporates have at the moment as well, rather than address a core problem, you address symptoms and ongoing. I don't know whether it's the humans have transferred that to the organizations.
I think there's a little bit of both that, and I think organizations generally are getting better at this, and thinking about workplace health and safety and well-being. So we always heard about workplace health and safety, but well-being is a fairly new thing. And you know, not-for-profits and health organizations tend to do this a little bit better than some of the corporates. Some of them pay a bit of lip service to it. Some of them do it better than others, but at least they're thinking about it now. And as we talked about before, people will go to where they feel they can get the most out of life, not just in terms of work and career, but giving back to them in terms of their ability to do what they need to do for themselves.
That's true, very true, and I think the workplace of today is very different to the workplace of 10, 20 years ago, just in terms of the conversations and consideration for the individual as well as the shift, well, depending on the environment, the shift away from work hard, play hard, which is kind of like a spiral downwards. And, you know, I travel to Japan every year, and you know, it's still a massive social challenge over there, or cultural challenge, actually, when it comes to how do you get that balance, and how do you, as a whole country, as a whole, because we're all part of the same ecosystem, make it socially acceptable to have a balance in life. Cool. Well, I think that's been brilliant to sort of understand not only the podcast and direction, I think very importantly, as you called out, the role of science and the importance for all of us to better understand. I think Ashen was also curious earlier around, you know, you're from a tech background, but you've got an interest in science. And I think you sort of explained how you found your way into that. And I think it's great for others. So definitely put the link in the description below so people can actually find Brains Matter podcast. And hopefully if you're releasing more regularly, people will sort of pick up the mantle and get on board. You've got some incredible speakers, and I think it's going to be valuable for all of us. But also just thanks for sharing that the stories around your own journey when it comes to recognizing the impact of stress and making that, you know, life-changing decision to actually do something about it on the spot. And I'm gathering that for you, life is substantially greener now, but also it allows you, as you mentioned, capacity to do other things, such as your podcast or other activities outside of work and with family.
I think it does make a big difference. There was a while there, and as many of my listeners know, I did sort of disappear for a little while as I sorted out a few things and a few challenges, but back on track now. So if any listeners know of someone who thinks should be on the show, then feel free to reach out and contact me. And just want to say thank you for having me on your show, Alex and Ashen.
Thanks a lot for being available for us, and I think we'll be chatting to you very shortly. Thanks for that.